Our reading today comes from Genesis 15. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You've given me no children, so a servant in my house will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, To your descendants I give this land.
Great. Wonderful. Well, good morning. Oh, a little bit echoey there. My name is Liam, and I am one of the leaders here, and may I just add my welcome all guests here today, whether you're here for the dedication or you're a student arriving in the city or for whatever reason, it is fantastic to have you here. Although I have to admit, you've come on a slightly unusual Sunday. It's not every week, I promise, that we read a passage about butchery in the ancient Near East and the chopping up of animals, and I promise I have no intention of reenacting it this morning. You can rest at ease. But as Steve said, there is a reason why we are looking at this ancient story. Thank you, Sanjay. We are thinking about the life of Abraham, this man who lived about 4,000 years ago and is known as the father of faith. And we are looking at his story so that we can see lessons that he learned and we can apply them in our own context. And some weeks that connection is very obvious. Some weeks it's a little more obscure. Today is the latter of those. But I actually, in a weird kind of way, think that it's a pertinent passage to be looking at today. Because as we heard already through that just moving testimony, God is a God who loves family and who loves to keep his promises. And sometimes it is a challenge to cling on to those promises. And this story, like the one we've just heard, well, it contains a Sarah, for one thing, but it's also about a couple who were trusting God for a promise of the expansion of their family through celebratory moments and setbacks. And they kept clinging to God through heartache, through pain, through questions, and through disappointment. And at the core of this passage that we've just heard read is, I think, the same question that for me resonated through that testimony we've just heard, which is, how can I know if I can really trust God? I think that's a question that all of us ask at some point in our lives. Whether you would consider yourself a religious person or not, every one of us at some point will be confronted with something which will make us ask, is there a God? And if there is, how do I know if I can trust him? It's a universal question. And so I want to explore that through this passage today. But first, let me just address the elephant in the room, or rather the sort of severed cow in the room. Because there's some stuff in this passage that is frankly quite strange. And it's easy as a modern Western reader or listener to look at it and think, I don't know what I do with all these elements that seem so culturally distant from where I am. What do we do with those? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I hit a milestone in my parenting. You've got this to look forward to. I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and I decided it was time to introduce her to one of the greatest film trilogies of all time, Back to the Future. Yes. Any fans? Yes, great Scott, they are great films, and I loved it, and she loved them too. It was wonderful, except that the whole experience made me feel quite old. Firstly, because I went to get the DVD, and then I had to explain to her what a DVD was. Some blank faces in the room. It's basically like a tiny portion of Netflix, but round and shiny. And so I put in the DVD and they're playing the film, and it dawns on me, hang on, this thing is set in the 1980s. I was born in the 1980s. And then they travel to the distant future, which is 2015. Right? My daughter was born in 2016. And I'm feeling old. I'm feeling old at this point. The only consolation was lots of it was also set in the 50s. I wasn't around then, as some of you were. So I'm feeling okay. And sorry to put that on you. But actually, I'm not. Anything I can do to boost my own self-esteem right now. But so I'm having this experience of just showing this film to my daughter, and she's loving it. She's really enjoying it. But there were a few moments that raised questions for her. And it wasn't the time travel, right? She was fine with that. It wasn't the hoverboards. Like, no questions about that. Her questions were, why are people dressed like that? Why are people saying that? Why are they doing that? And I found myself multiple times through the films answering questions that I didn't expect to be answering, but having to say, well, you know what? That's just how people dressed and spoke and lived at that time. And you know what? If you had lived then in that place, you would have done the same. Now imagine that scaled up 4,000 years. The opening chapters of the Bible give us a window into a world very different from our own. And we can look at stuff and go, this is very weird. And the God who inspired this book is very, very weird. But actually, lots of what we see in these passages would have made perfect sense at the time. If you were living in the ancient Near East, you would have done the same. You would have understood this world that you were living in. And it's very easy as modern readers of the Bible to look at this and think, the Christian God, he says and does some very weird things as if it was his idea. Actually, that's often not the case. Many of the rituals and things we read in these ancient scriptures, they existed in many different ancient cultures. It's not like the Lord designed them. That's just how the world operated at that time. And what the Christian God has done is that in order to communicate to people in that culture, he used their pre-existing rituals in a way that would make sense to them so that he can speak to them his message of love. And actually, what he often does is he takes these rituals that everyone knew, everyone was doing, and he subtly turns them on their head to show how he is different from any other God and any other nation. And so if we're to understand this passage, we need to try and read it through the eyes of an ancient Near Eastern believer of whatever religion, and we need to ask ourselves, what has God tried to show about himself in this passage? So, to understand that, I need to just explain a couple of things about a cultural practice called covenant making. Now, a covenant was an agreement between two parties in which promises were made under oath, kind of like a contract. But the purpose of a covenant was to establish a new relationship which contained new privileges but also responsibilities. There are all sorts of covenants that you don't need to know about from this morning, but some of them were between individuals or tribes or families or whole nations or kings. And lots of them were between equals, maybe where people say, okay, as equals, we are going to agree to have each other's backs, to go for war for one another, all for one, one for all, that sort of thing. But actually, the majority of covenants were made between unequal parties, where people were known as the stronger and the weaker party. The suzerain and the vassal were the technical terms, the lord and the servant, or sometimes they would use family language of father and son. And if kings or if nations entered into a covenant, they were saying, I want to take on this new relationship in which there is privilege and responsibility. Actually, we make covenants like that in our world all the time. Things like marriage, things like adoption, these are covenants that form new relationships, where we welcome someone who is not biologically connected to us into our family. And the covenant actually makes us family. And with that comes privilege and responsibility. The amazing thing actually about adoption is that if you take someone into your family, you have the same legal commitment to them as you do to a biological child, because the covenant makes you family. And there's blessing. There's a new identity, a new start, a new inheritance, all these wonderful things that come with that. But you also pledge your desire and your commitment to care for that individual. That's what covenant does. And often in these sort of unequal relationships, the powerful party would make commitments to protect and defend and provide for the weaker party. But the weaker party would submit to the powerful party and say, I promise you, hesed is the Hebrew word. It means loyalty. I pledge my loyalty to you. And they would make this commitment under oath and do some slightly unusual things, as we just heard in this passage. They would make a covenant. Actually, the Hebrew term, it says they would cut a covenant for a very good reason. They would do what we saw in this passage. They would take an animal and they would cut it in half and they would separate it out. It's pretty gruesome. And then they would walk between the parts of the animal and make their vows. And typically, if this was a covenant between unequal parties, then it was the weaker party who would do this, who would walk through the severed animal and make their vows. And it's pretty gruesome. Actually, we learn more about this from outside the Bible than we do within the Bible. Many cultures practice this. And there was something about the symbolism which was designed to heighten the sense of commitment that you were making. In the 8th century BC, in an Assyrian text, it talks about a covenant that was made between two kings. And it says this, this lamb was cut apart, and an oath says, this head of the lamb is not the head of the spring lamb, it's the head of Mati'ilu, who was one of the kings. And it goes on, and there's a quote on the screen at some point if you want to look into it. But effectively, the symbolism of this is this. This lamb which has been severed represents the one making the covenant, such that if I break the hesed loyalty that I've pledged, let it be done to me what has been done to this animal. Like, it's a serious thing. It's a gruesome thing. But that's how things operated in the ancient world, and everyone knew it. The unequal party, the weaker party, would walk between the animals and would pledge hesed loyalty to the superior one, and saying, I recognize that I will suffer this curse if I break our covenant. You with me? Gross, right? History lesson over. Let's go back to the passage for a second and see what this shows us about what is going on. So God promised to Abraham that he was going to give him a family through which all the nations of the world would be blessed. And Abraham says, well, there's a problem because I remain childless. You haven't given me an heir. And so actually, as it stands, when I die, all my inheritance is going to go to my servant who's not even from this nation. There's a problem. It doesn't seem clear how the promise of God is going to be dealt with. And so Abraham and Sarah are grappling with this disappointment and this questioning and this doubt and the pain and heartache. But God doubles down on his promise. And he says this, do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, your very great reward. And that word shield, in covenant terms, it means protector, benefactor, provider. The stronger party who is promising to commit to serving and defending and providing for the weaker party, Abraham. And Abraham goes outside and God shows him the stars and says, I'm going to give you offspring as numerous as these, which just felt like a million miles away from what he could have imagined. But God is making a covenant with him. He's saying, I will be your protector and your provider. And God is putting himself under an oath to do that for Abraham. And it says this, Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Abraham believed the Lord. That word righteousness, it means goodness and purity, but it's not just about sort of matching up to a moral law. It's actually a relational word, because it means to be in right relationship with someone. And it's like God has said, okay, Abraham, on the basis of your response of trusting me and believing me, I say that is a good decision. Welcome into good relationship with me. Now I can pour upon you all the abundant blessings I have, a new identity, a new name, a new inheritance for you and for all your family. And how did Abraham get it? He didn't earn it. He simply believed the Lord and received it by faith. I don't know what comes to mind for you when you hear that word belief. It's easy to think of it as being a primarily intellectual thing, right? I get it all sorted out here and I understand it and then great, okay, it'll all happen. Actually, belief, biblically speaking, it's not just an intellectual thing. It might start there, but it's actually to do with putting our whole lives, our whole being in trust of the one that you're believing. It's about putting the whole of your weight on God and the things that he has said. It's an active word, not just intellectual. It's about putting the whole of your weight into his hands. This week I was Yeah, I was scrolling the internet and I should have been sermon writing. But I came across this video which made me chuckle. And I'm going to show it to you, partly because then it justifies me scrolling through the Instagram when I shouldn't have been. But also because it just amused me. And I think in a weird kind of way it makes this point quite nicely. It's 12 seconds long and you're going to enjoy it. It's some guys playing together with a rope swing. Roll the video. I love that video, except poor guy. I mean, he trusted his friends. He had faith, right? He believed. You're just going to keep playing that, aren't you? And no one's going to listen to me again the whole of the rest of the sermon. But he had faith. Like, he put the whole of his weight in his belief in his friends, and splash landed as a result. And in a weird kind of way, when I saw that, I thought, I reckon that's how a lot of people feel about God. Like, if I really put my trust in him, if I really take a leap of faith, will he be there for me, or will I fall? Will everything go wrong? Like, if I really chose to change my life based on what he says, rather than the way I thought my life would go, like, will he support me? Will he sustain me? Or will he fail me? Will he let me down? I take a stand for something. Will he hold me, or will I fall? Belief in God, the kind of belief that Abraham was able to exhibit, it wasn't just an intellectual assent. Okay, I understand. Now we'll wait and see. He put the whole of his life into God's hands. He put the whole weight of his being and his hopes and his dreams and his expectations and his pain and his disappointment. He put it all into God's hands, trusting, I believe that you are the one who is able to sustain me. And it says he believed the Lord and it was credited to him as righteousness. You know, I'm not naturally a courageous type. Like, I like the idea that maybe if God blesses me and shows he's good, then maybe I'll trust him. That's not the way faith works. It works the other way around. Abraham believed and God credited it to him as righteousness. You don't get to enjoy the rope swing if you don't take the leap of faith. And there's something here about the importance of putting your trust in God, even when you don't know how the story is going to work out. That delights the heart of God. Abraham believed, and it was credited to him as righteousness. If we are to receive the abundant blessings of God, there's something required of us. We need to take the choice to put our faith in him. That doesn't mean that we will understand 100% of all our questions, have them all answered, know how everything is going to work out at all. No, not at all. But it means that we have put our trust in him enough to start a journey trusting that he'll get us to the end. Look at what Abraham says next. Having said he believed the Lord, his next phrase, verse 8, is this. But sovereign Lord, how can I know that I'll gain possession of the land, all the things you've promised? Think about the order. There's a promise from God. There's a response of faith. God credits it to him as righteousness. And then he says, yeah, but how do I know? Having expressed faith, he then expresses doubt. And the Lord doesn't backtrack. He doesn't say, oh, okay, I got it wrong. I take back that inheritance. No, it's okay to doubt. It's okay to be on a journey of exploring God, because faith is not about one moment and then it's done. It's actually about entering into a whole life of trusting the Lord. And if you are here today and you are a follower of Jesus and you are facing setbacks or challenges or doubts, God's answer to you is not, well, faith looks like just ignoring that reality and just like everything's going to be okay. No, we can bring our doubts. We can bring our pain to him as Abraham did, and he will graciously answer us. Actually, he shows Abraham why he should depend on him. God is incredibly gracious to Abraham. He doesn't just shoot him down or rebuke him. Instead, he actually gives him a reason for trusting him further. And true faith is not just like a blind leap in the dark. It's about having reason enough from all you've experienced to this point to say, I'm going to continue trusting you, God, from here on out. Because you've shown yourself to be faithful up to now, I'll trust that you'll continue to be faithful for the rest of my days. That's faith. And that's what God shows Abraham here in this moment. Abraham says, how can I know that I can trust you? And God responds by demonstrating his faithfulness in this rich and strange symbolic way of making a covenant. Abraham brings out some animals and he cuts them in two and he arranges the halves, and it's probably somewhat gruesome. And he knows what's coming because he's seen these rituals. He's seen others go through them. Maybe he's gone through them himself. And he knows this is a serious moment. That Abraham is about to walk between the parts of the animal, and he's about to commit himself to the Lord, to pledge hesed love to him, loyalty to the covenant. And he knows that in doing this, it's like he's going to invoke this curse upon himself. Let it be to me like these animals if I break this covenant. Like, it's a terrifying moment for Abraham. We're told that he is scared. But what happens next, no one would have seen coming. No one in the ancient world would have expected what God did next. Because instead of God demanding loyalty from Abraham, instead of God demanding that Abraham make the covenant, instead of demanding that Abraham walk through those severed bodies and take the curse upon himself, instead of all of that, God does it in Abraham's place. God makes a covenant with Abraham. It says, verse 17, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch, which represents God, passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, to your descendants, I give this land. God takes this cultural practice and he turns the whole thing on its head. He says, you think you know how the world works, that it's all about you submitting to me in terror, in fear. Actually, I want to show you I'm a totally different God. I am a God so committed to you that I will take your place. I will make the promise to you. I will pledge hesed loyalty to you because I love you. I will walk through that gruesome valley of death between the severed animals. I will take the curse of your broken covenant upon myself. Why? Because God is so committed to Abraham. He is so committed to relationship with his people that he is willing to step into our place. Friends, this is the good news at the heart of the Christian faith. That God is so committed to relationship with you. That he so wants you in his family. That he so wants to give you a new start, a new identity, a new name, a new inheritance, a purpose, a place within his family, and to be part of his plan for blessing this world. He is so committed to that he is willing to step into our place. God knew Abraham was going to mess up because Abraham's human, like me, and I mess up all the time. And God knew that. But he was so willing to take upon himself the consequences of Abraham's failure. And the same is true for everyone in this room today. He wants you as part of his family. And if you hear that and you think, well, that sounds lovely, but too good to be true, how can I know? I think you can know because of this. This strange little ritual actually points forward 2,000 years. To the greatest demonstration of the faithfulness of God you could ever imagine. Where God himself stepped into this world and took on flesh and became like us. I can't get my head around it, but the Bible says that Jesus Christ is both fully God and fully man, which means he uniquely is able to fulfill both parts of this covenant between God and humanity. Jesus stepped into this world and became like us. He lived a perfect life, the perfect embodiment of righteousness. And as he was approaching the moment of his death, he had a meal with his friends. And as part of the meal, he took some bread and he broke it in two. And he said, this is my body, right? And he broke it. And he said, this is my body that is broken for you. And he shared it round. And then he took this cup and he said, this cup represents my blood, which is said for you to make a new covenant. And does that picture remind you of anything? A severed body and an outpouring of blood to make a new covenant. Jesus is saying, this is what my death is going to do. And a couple of days later, when Jesus died on the cross, it's like he walked through that valley of the shadow of death for us, in our place. He took upon himself the consequences of all our failings. Why? Because he loves us. And he wants to show us how deeply committed the Father is to having us in his family. And so at the cross, he took upon himself all the sin of the world. He shed his blood so that you and I could be welcomed in. He made a new covenant, the greatest declaration he could possibly make to show you how wide is the love of God and how much he wants relationship with you. And 3 days later, he rose again from the dead to show that the old covenant is done, a new covenant has begun. That death is defeated, sin is defeated, suffering is defeated, and the Lord is making all things new. And his invitation is this: if you want to become part of his family, the door is wide open. He would love to have a relationship with you. And if you're here today and you are not yet a follower of Jesus, maybe you've grappled with questions about God. Maybe you don't feel that you've got it all sorted yet. That's fine. I have a million questions still. But if you know deep in your heart, I need a relationship with him, a loving Father, that's available today, and it's through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And how do we take hold of this new start, this new inheritance, this new identity? We don't earn it. We receive it in the same way that Abraham did. By faith, by putting our trust in Jesus. And so here's what we're going to do. In a moment, we're just going to end with a song. In fact, maybe the band could come up and the prayer team and the Next Steps team. And I want to give all of us, if you would like, an opportunity to put your trust in Jesus today. For some of us, this will be a repeated action for the 100th time, the 1000th time. If you're here today and you are already a follower of Jesus, maybe you're going through difficult things in your life and you're like, I am struggling to trust God right now. Then in a moment, I'm going to lead us in a prayer. And this is a way of you being able to say, okay, I recommit myself to the Lord. But if you're here today and you are not yet a follower of Jesus and you would like to start the journey of following him, then I'd invite you to pray this prayer along with us as well. The prayer will work for wherever you are on that journey of faith. Of course, if you're not ready at all, don't feel any pressure to pray. But I wonder if we could stand. And we're going to have the prayer up on the slides, and I'm going to ask you just to repeat it after me. Lord Jesus, thank you that you love me and you want me as part of your family. Thank you for dying for me, for forgiving my sin and failure. I believe that you rose from the dead so that I can have a brand new start and the gift of eternal life. Would you come into my heart and empower me to trust you and to live for you? Amen. Now, if you prayed that prayer for the first time, as a way of starting your relationship with Jesus, I want to say well done. It's the best decision you could make. I made the decision to start following him years ago, and honestly, there's been nothing like it. Knowing the relationship with a Heavenly Father who loves me and is for me and can support me through whatever. If you've made that decision today, we want to celebrate it with you. And so at the back, in a moment, we're going to start singing a song. At the back, we have a bunch of friends there, a Next Steps team who are willing to have a conversation with you and to talk you through that decision. If you prayed that prayer today, why don't you go and see them? They've got a gift they would love to give you to get you going on that journey, and they'd love to talk with you and answer any questions. In fact, I'm going to go over there, so come and join me. And if you want to bring a friend with you to mark this moment together, then come with me. It'll be great to talk with you and pray with you. The more the merrier. Otherwise, we're just going to sing one final song, just devoting ourselves to the Lord and celebrating his faithfulness. And if you are here today and you're already a follower of Jesus, but you know there's stuff in your life where you need more of his power, you need more of his intervention, maybe you feel like you're in a season of death and need some life to come out of it, the prayer team would love to pray for you. They're down here on my right, and they would happily pray with you for anything. So as soon as we start worshiping, if you want to join us at the Next Steps table, come on back. If you want to join us for prayer, come on down. If you just want to worship, be my guest. We're going to worship the Lord with one final song together.